I've still got my nose buried in Stacey Abrams' brand new book, Our Time Is Now. Stacey Abrams is one of my favorite public leaders. Here she is. She's a New York Times best-selling author. She served 11 years in the Georgia House of Representatives, 7 as minority leader, and became the 2018 Democratic nominee for governor of Georgia, where she won more votes than any other Democrat in the state's history. Unfortunately, her voters suffered voter suppression, and she did not win the race, although she should have won. I want to read a passage to you from Stacey Abrams' new book, Our Time Is Now. Love this book. It's very relevant to our current time, so it's important to read. This passage is called The False Seduction of Voter ID. Whenever I raise the issue of voter suppression, I can be certain proponents of more restrictive rules will respond with 2 standard retorts. The first is the specter of voter fraud. The rationale frequently used by conservatives to justify the implementation of several forms of suppression. As the argument goes, the rules are required to stop a horde from skewing the outcomes of elections. However, voter fraud has been debunked as exceptionally rare by multiple reputable organizations, not to mention the Ersatz Voting Commission established by Donald Trump himself. Nevertheless, for the record, let's review. Voter fraud refers typically to one of 2 occurrences. Number 1, impersonating another voter, or 2, a non-citizen, non-resident, or ineligible voter effectively casting a ballot. The former almost never happens. In fact, an American is more likely to be struck by lightning than to impersonate a voter. To be more specific, according to analysis, out of 1 billion votes cast between 2000 and 2014, only 31 instances of voter impersonation occurred. That's 31 out of 1 billion votes. As to non-citizen or non-resident voting, the almost universal explanation is voter confusion. In the United States, we have 51 different democracies in operation between individual state laws and federal laws. For example, if a person moves from Maine to Oklahoma, the rules change dramatically with regard to registration timing, eligibility, and remedies. National experts barely understand the complexity of local voting laws. How would the average person know? Fraud is a crime of intent. Most accusations of voter fraud are best described as misunderstandings. Restrictive voter identification is the main weapon to fight the non-existent wave of voter fraud. But this is not the same as basic voter ID. Basic voter ID has been a part of voting since the beginning, and both Democrats and Republicans agree that people should provide proof of who they are before casting ballots. 35 states require a form of identification, and the remaining 15 states typically accept identifying information based on what has been previously provided by the voter, such as a signature on file. What has changed in recent years is the type of identification required and the difficulty or expense of securing the necessary documents. Restrictive voter ID severely narrows the list of permitted documents that serve as proof, and these laws typically exclude previously permissible documents. Due to the success of this narrowing filter of acceptable documents, restrictive voter ID laws have become a key tool in the suppression toolbox. And we have seen that way too often in too many states. Stacey Abrams, Our Time Is Now. I love this book. I love Stacey Abrams. I'm going to read another passage from this book in another video segment.